Hello, everyone.
Welcome
to, that's okay. Welcome to today's Activity Strong Executive Edition webinar. My name is Megan McMahon, and I am the Director of Strategic Development here at Link Senior. For today's webinar event, we will be providing you with one free NAB, NCAP, NCCDP, NCTRC, and NZSRDT CEU credit. And to be eligible for those CEU credits today, you do need to remain in the webinar room for the full hour. At the end of the webinar, I will put the required post-webinar CEU survey evaluation link in the webinar room chat box. And you will also receive that email link this afternoon, but be sure to check your spam folder in case the email lands there. We ask that you complete the CEU survey link by midnight Eastern time this Thursday. And if you have any questions as you're completing the survey, please email us at webinars@linksenior.com. Your CEU certificates will be issued before the end of the day by Friday by email. And I will now hand it over to Charles D. Villemorn, CEO and co-founder of Link Senior.
Thank you so much, Megan. Welcome, everyone. Welcome to you, James.
Hello.
I think it's the third time. Hi. Third time?
Third
time,
yeah,
right?
third time. I think I need to do 5 times for the t-shirt, the commemorative t-shirt. So 2 more.
We're super excited to have you, James. Thank you so much for coming back. Everyone, I'll quote unquote formally introduce James in a few seconds, but like Megan said, welcome everyone. Excited to have you all. This is our Activity Strong quote unquote executive edition, where we take the world of activities and life enrichment and do everything we can to elevate it and to bring it up to the executive function of our senior living industry. A little bit about background is, Link Senior started this initiative, but it is done in partnership with amazing organizations, including Activity Connection, NAP, and NCAP. And again, the whole and the only goal of this initiative is to acknowledge and empower activity and life enrichment professional, which is kind of a great way to segue into today's topic, a new kind of activity calendar strategy for dementia care. And again, I don't want to kind of start introducing James right now, but I am excited to hear about his insights because he has unique experience, unique passion, but also unique kind of quote unquote disruptive ideas on what to do about this topic. So again, super short introduction and we'll get into our discussion. In terms of background, Link Senior started 2 cool initiatives. One is called Old People Are Cool, just on the premise that we're not fan of segregation based on age. And as I mentioned, Activity Strong as a way to elevate what we think is the most, I guess, the essential and most important part of senior living. Just a little bit of background. So Link Senior is this company that I was, kind of lucky and honored and excited to co-found 16 years ago. We're based in Washington, D.C., sunny Washington, D.C. James shared that he is going to get 90 degrees today in Texas. So I guess we all get that difference, but spring is here. Our work is all about elevating what activity and life enrichment professionals are about, which is helping residents find purpose every day. Last thing about Link Senior is we're super proud of our work, and in the quote unquote spirit of today's session, which is focused on dementia care, we are, Link Senior is a evidence-based platform. So we did work in proving our outcomes, and that was published in a peer-reviewed journal in 2019. So on with our introduction. These are the webinar objectives. And, I mentioned, I think, 2 or 3 times already my excitement of having James here. James Lee is the CEO and co-founder of Bella Grows. I think the best place to start to talk about James, everyone, is to say that he is, quote unquote, one of us. James, you actually spent some time, a good amount of time as an activity professional, right?
Right. Absolutely. It was my second technically my third job in senior living, and I still say it's, I guess, a little catchphrase around this, but I still tell people today, families that I meet, that it was one of the toughest jobs that I had, and I absolutely mean that, because it's such an important part of what we do. So anytime I get to talk with a group like this, I really am excited. I feel like I'm talking to my own group.
Your tribe. You know, James also really has unique perspective, because, you know, you don't find often professionals that have worked at different level of an organization, kind of a different rank, right? You don't find often people that have worked in different size of organizations. And the one thing that I really admire from you, James, actually two things, but one is your ability to tackle some of the most important issues in the industry today. Like last time you spoke with us, you spoke about workforce. You were working with Charles Turner, and you had these huge, really nice insights about staffing. And then the second thing is just your passion, and that's probably the best place to start in terms of letting you introduce your work right now, which is, and I remember you telling me the first time about this billboard you have, but I can just tell you, for me, it's the best thing ever, right? Because two things, it speaks about why people show up at work, why this industry is so needed, and a little bit like the way we do it with All People Are Cool. I think it just shifts the paradigm of what dementia care is about, right? So with that, everyone, so excited to quote unquote formally introduce you now, James, and I'll let you take it over from here. And just let me know when you want me to stop sharing the screen so you and I can have a conversation. Thanks.
Great.
Everyone.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. Thanks everyone for having me. We'll jump straight into it. I want to provide a caveat here that, you know, we're talking about activities and activities calendars. I am specifically talking about dementia care at the moment. We will incorporate, you know, how it is involved and tied to the other facets of senior living. And I think this will be a relevant conversation no matter where you are in the senior living spectrum. But just a caveat today, I am specifically talking about dementia care. Real quick, thanks for putting this up on the screen, Charles. I think it's a good launching point for our discussion and kind of where I come from. My first job in senior living 15 years ago was as a caregiver. I worked the floor in both independent living and assisted living. I was a concierge. I answered the phones on the weekends, and where you see families most of the time. And then my first job after those initial positions was as an activities director. And I honestly, I went into that thinking this will be a fun job. I'll get to just do fun things all day long. But little did I realize that the fun things are the they're the visible parts of your work, but really the hard work happens behind the scenes in planning, getting to know your residents, all of that. And it was so rewarding. But at some point I realized that I have to work activities within the confines of the business parameters, right? And I think we all probably understand what that means. Like, you're given a specific budget, you're given a very specific, here are your priorities, here are your things that you need to do. And I never really found it an area where I thought we can just create, experiment. And so 13 years or so after that initial job, I get to experiment. I only had to create a company in order to do that. So this billboard is just one of those examples of how we experiment and do things that there's no red tape, we just do it. So I haven't seen many senior living billboards, but the ones I have seen are exceptional senior living here, and like a beautiful stock photo or a photo of a community. And it's just a lot of stuff on a billboard. And there was a lot of internal debate about, well, shouldn't we at least put our phone number or our website here? And we thought, no, let's strip all that away. And this isn't even our story. This is the family story. Love is greater than dementia beckons their story, their reflections. And so this is really a perfect unplanned introduction. I didn't know this was going to be up here, but this is a really great introduction to the topic today. So let's dig in. I think we can go ahead and take that off the screen. So I shared this prompt online as we were promoting this conversation. Calendars. Why does Charles, James, Megan, why do we use calendars in our normal day? Charles, do you use Outlook or Google or some version of a calendar?
Gmail.
Gmail,
Google
okay.
Calendar.
And just generally speaking, why do you use a calendar?
Because I forget everything.
Yeah, okay, you forget everything, so it helps you to stay organized?
Correct. Stay organized and just manage my day and actually manage my day.
Yeah. So I live by my calendar. It's really hard for me to function without it. But I use a calendar like most people to organize, plan, and make decisions. And when you think about the people that we support in dementia care, what are the most common symptoms? What are some of the most common symptoms that people living with dementia experience? The inability to plan, organize, and make decisions. So when we just think about that for a second. We use calendars to organize, plan, and make decisions. And by nature, that's kind of the idea here of why we would use that in an activities kind of setting. But we're doing it for people who cannot do those things themselves. So then the question is it truly person-centered approach when you are doing the thinking and the planning and the decision-making for them? So a little bit of history here about the calendar, I think in general. In most states, I believe, this is a requirement. Like having an activities calendar is a requirement by the state. We also have that requirement. We're an assisted living facility licensed by Health and Human Services in Texas, and we do have to have a calendar. So technically we have one. However, I got to tell you, we do that more for compliance. The things that we actually do at Bella Groves are focused around what we call a successful day. So there's going to be a lot of parts to this. I'm going to jump around a little bit, but I think this is kind of the root of it. What we want to think about is how do we help our care team? How do we help all of our employees at Bella Groves to facilitate a successful day? Activities, I know we don't all call it activities, especially in dementia care. We may call it programs or engagement. What we're really talking about is making sure that somebody feels engaged and fulfilled and purposeful throughout the day. That's really hard to do if we are planning everything out for them. 10 o'clock, we're doing chair exercises. 11:30, we're doing scripture readings. 2 o'clock, we're doing a walk around the community. I think when you're planning out the day for people, you really do remove a lot of the person-centeredness of what's intended there, right? So one of our kind of references for a successful day is looking at the circadian rhythm. And so you can Google that, or you just might naturally know what that is. But as you study the circadian rhythm, we may not consciously think about that every day, you and I, this group, but we are regulated by our natural sleep-wake cycles. So I don't know about you, Charles, but I am sharp. When are you sharpest in the day?
As early as possible in the day.
Early as possible in the day, right? So if you need to do something with high cognitive reserve, good mental capacity, something that is of high stakes to you, do you schedule that for 3 o'clock in the afternoon?
No.
Yeah, I do most
at
of
the
my
latest. Yeah, at the latest 12 p.m. latest.
Yeah, I do most of my important stuff early in the day too, but it stands to reason because that's kind of how the natural body works. You're going to be at your sharpest cognitive ability somewhere in the mid-morning, depending on what time you wake up. So think about it this way. If your activities calendar just is filled with stuff to do, just stuff to take up time in the day, think about for some of our residents, because mid-morning is their sharpest time of the day, that's when we schedule family conversations, right? That's the time when we want them to have the highest level of engagement. And think about deep social connections isn't always just having a fun balloon toss game. A deep social connection and meaning might mean, okay, today I'm going to connect through a video call with my daughter, and that free-flowing conversation is going to happen in the mid-morning. Well, great. That's when you should plan it. It's not a typical calendar, but it is a person-centered activity. So on the calendar, it might just read something generic like family time, but we're tailoring that specifically to the resident in terms of how it's going to be engaging for them, right? So, and it doesn't have to be a family activity, by the way. You just have to recognize that in that mid-morning time, you're going to have, for most people, the sharpest cognitive climb, the ability. So if we were having, current events, that's something, we do at a lot of communities. Current event discussions at 4 o'clock in the afternoon might not be the best time to do that in dementia care. Heck, it may not be the best time to do it in any part of our, senior living community. But think about if we were to do so, one of our early day activities is a daily devotional. A lot of our residents, it's something meaningful to them. But in dementia care, we can't just say, here's, a printout of a devotional. And in most cases, what are caregivers going to do? They're going to read it, and then they're going to try to facilitate a discussion. But really, if you're going to do person-centered, activities around that, you have to first understand, okay, let's assume there's 4 residents sitting around that table. You as the caregiver need to have the dementia awareness and training to understand, how do I tailor this to each person around the table? So one of the ways that I do that is that somebody who has maybe more cognitive ability at that time, maybe they're the ones who read the verse. Maybe they're the ones who read it. Another person participating may be the ones to hand it out. So if they're not as conversational, I still want them to engage in the activity. So I may say, hey, Mr. Charles, would you mind making sure everybody has a copy, right? So you're participating in the activity. Somebody reads it. A different person may be able to have a Q&A or a discussion around it. But in real time, the person facilitating that activity has to have the awareness and knowledge to be able to facilitate that, right? So there's a lot of examples I could give, but the major takeaway point here is that if you plan around a successful day, rather than here's a month's worth of stuff we're going to do in April, you can have a lot more autonomy, you can have a lot more flexibility, and a lot more person-centeredness, but it is all rooted in, do the care partners and activities directors have the training and knowledge to be able to facilitate that? Charles, you wrote a bunch of notes. I don't know if you have a question before I move on. Okay.
A bunch of notes, yes.
And we should also probably toss to the group here. I don't intend on, the next 40 minutes just kind of preaching to the choir here. I want to tackle tough conversations and answer questions too. So if you have a question, put it in the Q&A. It's going to be hard to monitor the chat. It's going so fast. So Q&A might be great, but Charles, let me bounce it over to you for some thoughts on what I just shared.
Yeah. Well, thanks for doing that, James. And actually, before I get into the question, just a few notes for the audience. There's 2 things. One is, I forgot to say that at the beginning, but if you chat using the chat feature in Zoom, make sure you select everyone so that everyone can see, because I see a number of people just doing host and panelists. And in that case, it's only James and I seeing this, and Megan. So that's one thing. The second thing is, if you have questions, obviously, please let us know in the Q&A. The third one, and I think, James, this is something I'd love to, kind of partner with you on this, which is that I really believe that in senior living, there's, like you, because you're a founder, that there's a lot of disruptiveness that is still waiting to happen. And obviously, we wouldn't be talking about the activity calendar today if you didn't feel that the quote-unquote thing could be improved. And it's just an invitation for the audience to consider that there's a lot of things to be invented. There's a lot of innovation to bring. And, you can all come up with stuff. You can all come up with new ideas, share it in the audience chat, share it on Facebook, share it with your friends, send questions to James. At the end, we'll share his email or to us. But just so you know, like what we're experiencing right now, as we sit, the 4th of April, 2023, I think the best has to come when it comes to that particular topic today, which is the activity calendar in dementia care. Would you generally agree to that, James?
Sorry, I was reading a Q&A question. I missed what you were saying,
okay.
Charles.
No, I would just make a comment that the best is yet to come, but there's a lot of
certainly.
stuff.
Yeah, best is yet to come. And these conversations, these group meetings, I think are a real impetus for that. But we have to be able to call out the things that are always what we assume is tried and true. And if I may, I want to incorporate one of the questions into my response here. So from Marty Doring, how does CMMS audits feel about day calendars as opposed to monthly that they're accustomed to? So we actually do both, Marty. We actually keep a calendar because it is a licensing requirement for us to keep it. But generally we try to match that up. But this approach for kind of a successful day, or what does the week kind of look like? We present those as training tools for caregivers. So it's maybe a little bit of splitting hairs. The activity calendar is technically our activity calendar. However, the successful day model, or the 3 days at a glance, we use that as a training reference for caregivers to be able to facilitate the proper activities. Hope that makes sense.
That was pretty clear. Thanks, James. No, I mean, before we get into the quote unquote meat of the topic, I personally have another thing also, about calendars, which is that besides the schedule, there's also the default length of time, right? By default, my calendar goes into 1 hour block.
Mm-hmm.
And 1 hour activities doesn't really work as a standard in dementia care.
Absolutely not.
How do you do that? Yeah, how does that work for you all?
Yeah, and there was another question here in the Q&A that kind of spoke about that. Christina Randolph, most of my dementia veterans cannot stay on task for more than 5 minutes. How can I keep them engaged better while staying within the person-centered model? Great question there. So, and there's another question here I want to incorporate into my answer about there's somebody saying I'm the lone person for 3 buildings. I don't have any assistants, and if I were to hand somebody a devotional, they'd probably set it aside and turn on the TV. Deborah, we've all been there. I know what that means. Okay, so here's kind of my response to all of that. Our model at Bella Groves, we have a very high staffing ratio of care partners. We're a 32-bed community. We have 2 16-bed communities, and we have a 1-to-4 staffing ratio. So that means that on any given day, outside of managers, activities directors, dementia directors, kitchen, we have a 1-to-4 staffing ratio. So when we're full, which we're not full yet, when we are full with 32 residents, between the 2 buildings, we're going to have 8 care partners during the waking hours, 6 a.m. to 10 p.m. Our entire strategic plan is focused around competencies for the caregivers. So they are truly kind of an all-purpose player at Bella Groves. Some caregivers do meals in the mornings, simple breakfast meals. They do care tasks, obviously, but activities are an integrated part of what they do. In addition to that, or how we set that up, is that we have a 13-week progressive dementia skills check training that we provide to everybody who works with us. So not only do we have more staffing, but we're actually training them to understand dementia, understand what's going on in somebody's brain. Why can't Mr. Charles interact and engage in this activity for more than 5 minutes? Well, we explained to them, well, he has this form of dementia on top of PTSD. So here's how we're going to engage him on this. So I'll give a specific example of this. There was a family member I was visiting with yesterday. Their dad lives in an independent living community, and they think, you know what, we should have either been in assisted living or gone straight to memory care. They felt like they made the wrong decision. And they said, my dad doesn't do anything. He sits in his room all day. And most of the reason for that is he doesn't want to be embarrassed because of his inability to kind of hold conversation. And so they were talking about, well, I asked him, well, what are the things that he likes to do? And they said he loves to gamble. So he loves to play cards. He used to go to Vegas all the time. That's his thing. But how could we possibly, have him engage in that activity? A lot of activities directors are initially going to think, well, let's create a poker game. Let's create a poker game for him and other residents here. The problem with that for this particular gentleman is that he said, I don't want to play for nickels and quarters. He was a serious gambler. That was something that he was interested in, but that's not what he wants to do for nickels, dimes, and quarters. So the 5-minute activity here, imagine if as a caregiver, you were trained to all of this background. And I said, Megan, caregiver Megan, I want you to go do an activity or engagement with Charles. I want you to ask him questions about poker strategy. For 5 minutes, just ask him about betting strategy. Just ask him about how do I do this? He's going to be more engaged in those 5 minutes with you than a 2-hour poker game with somebody that he's not interested in. There's a little bit of background noise here. But that is how we take person-centered care. And it's not about tricking him into purposefulness, but it's understanding this is what this particular resident wants to do. So you've got to train your caregiver on tips. You got to give him a cheat sheet to say, this is how you're going to engage with him, and ask him for poker advice. Charles, do you have any poker advice? No, we'll move past that one.
I want to thank you for your patience, James, because the background noise are the 2 birds that I have in my house. So hopefully they're not going to participate too much here. There was a number of additional questions when it came to your training, James.
Mm-hmm.
One is, have you seen, I'll try to merge several. Have you seen your training to have an impact on staff turnover?
Absolutely. Yeah, you know, everything that we do is built around training. In truth, we tell people that we are a dementia education company. We happen to have a care facility where we utilize that information, but we're a training company. And that rolls in one of the other tips I have here. I also want to address here that I'm seeing some comments and people are probably feeling a certain way about this too. Well, James, that sounds nice. A 1-to-4 staffing ratio and 13 weeks of dementia training. We just don't have that model. So what do we do? I realize that the practical challenge of this, but this is why we're having this conversation. I was fed up with the status quo. I was fed up with, well, I can't do the things that I feel like are what people deserve, you know, and people meaning not just us, the care providers, but residents. It is possible. We're doing it right now. So I understand that we can't just have ideas and share ideas, but in order to really move our industry forward, some of us have to break away from the pack, and we're just going to have to do it ourselves. So that's what we're doing at Bella Groves. 1-to-4, it is just caregivers. It doesn't include anybody on the management team or ancillary team. It's just our caregivers. In terms of retention, the last time we measured it, we had about a 40% staff turnover rate in annualized. So compare that to 80 to 100% in assisted living, we're doing a lot better. I do believe that the training is making it feel to caregivers like they can be more successful. So I'll add this quick thought and then bounce it back to Charles. Most training initiatives for caregivers, it's a compliance-driven thing, right? It's a compliance-driven thing of, oh, hey, we've got an in-service. You got to do this thing about falls management. Oh, we've got a training that we got to do on, you know, safe food handling. All of those things are important. But if you think about it from the caregiver's perspective, is the training helping them to be more capable at the thing they actually want to do, which is to help residents? So one specific example, caregivers are floored by this when we train them on this. If there's a resident with kind of exit-seeking behavioral expressions, in most cases, what are those caregivers taught to do? Redirect. It's a term we use in dementia care, and I'm actually trying to fight that. They're taught to redirect. Hey, Mr. Charles, come away from the door. Let's go do puzzles instead, right? But it oftentimes doesn't help. When I help caregivers to understand that a behavioral expression is an unmet need, and we ask them to play detective at that point. Why is Mr. Charles going to the door? You know what? And this is a real life example. There was a resident recently who said, I can't find my car. My car is somewhere and I can't see it. We had a caregiver, based on their training, take the resident out and walk around the parking lot. And in that moment, have the conversation with that resident. It was engaging, not technically an activity on the calendar, but that resident was able to go out. The caregiver felt like a trusted partner. They walked around the community, and she herself was the one who said, I must have parked it somewhere else. And she said, let's go back inside. So 9 out of 10 times when people are going to the door at Bella Groves, our staffing ratio and our training allows for caregivers to think critically and decide, you know what? Hey, team, I'm going to go step outside with Mr. Charles, and everybody gets what we're doing.
Yeah. Sorry, I was taking a few notes, but I'll try to kind of not go through everything. You know, James, there's a couple of things I want to share here. I'll start with kind of what you just discussed, which is that this idea of unmet need, obviously, you know, when you think about behavior expressions, they come usually for two reasons, right? They either come from pain or they come from boredom, you know, that kind of, and I think that often we forget that if we redirect, we're only delaying, right? So I love your approach of tackling that as it is, because not only is it person-centered care, but you're tackling the quote-unquote issue, you're helping the person. And just a quick comment on what you said before about your 40% turnover. I don't know if you know this, but before, like in 2019, before the pandemic, the national turnover was actually 48%, right? So you're actually doing better than the average industry pre-COVID. So kudos to you. Kudos to your efforts there. Going forward, yeah, go ahead.
Well, I was going to say it's kudos to the care team because they're the ones engaging in the training content. You know, and I'm trying to scan the comments as we're going. There's a lot. It's hard to keep up with. But Natalie, you said, I love the idea of going along with their story, looking for a car, but that's not realistic in a locked unit. I want to tell you, we are a locked unit. We're a dementia care community. So we have locked doors, but our doors are clear so people can always see to the outside. The way that we do our programming, we are constantly opening the doors and going outside with our residents. We instead of redirection, we teach around the term reassurance. How can you in your interaction reassure the resident, and what does that mean? And we do drills and we practice and we give we do role playing with our caregivers so that they can learn these skills. So we are a locked facility, but every single day we have residents going outside with caregivers. And here's the beautiful part about this. Family members are being trained to this as well. So they are understanding our approach. And so that was another point in this tip sheet that we're providing. Your families have to be part of the program or the calendar or the approach as well. And again, I know there's a lot of comments here about AL and MC. I am specifically talking about memory care at the moment, but these are all possible within dementia care. You just have to have the creativity and the operating mindset to do it.
That was going to be my next set of kind of topics for you, James, which is family members. So can you just walk us through like how much training do you provide to your families, and also how much do they actually take? Are they asking for more? Like, what's that relationship in the training part?
Okay, so we part of our kind of strategy as a company here is that we want to develop dementia training content. So we are a membership-based company, meaning our goal is to help families through the entire caregiving journey, from the onset of symptoms all the way through the end. So having a care facility is part of our offerings, but there are two other things that we do. One of those is what we call a dementia navigator service. So we help families who have a loved one at home to take the guesswork out of dementia care. So that's the middle part of our service. So we coordinate doctor's appointments, we give them dementia tips, we go into their house and train their caregivers that they've hired, et cetera, et cetera. The other part of what we do is we provide a learning center around dementia, and that's an online learning center. So all of our families who move into, who have a loved one move in, they get access to our learning center. And the content that they're going through is exactly the same content as our care team. They are learning exactly the same skills in exactly the same content. So we have family members that do actively look at the courses or reading the courses and surprisingly are applying the stuff that they're learning, which is amazing. The other thing that we do is when we have family meetings, we include a dementia lesson as part of the agenda. So they know that every time they interact with us in a group setting, they're going to learn, talk about, and engage in a dementia skill set. So these are things where I'm sure if you've been in dementia care, you've probably had a family member come in, take mom out for an entire day, right? All day long, 8 hours. And then she comes back, and what state is she in after that? And we have to almost undo all of that work. Instead, here at Bella Groves, our families are part of the plan. They tell us, hey, James, we're planning a 3-day Easter trip. How do we manage this? And so we sit down with them, and we don't just give them a med plan, we give them an actual care plan and dementia care plan. So like, here's her successful day here. And we're going to actually give them a little bit of a tool that says, do these activities in these blocks. And it's so families feel like they're contributing to the care plan, not just like, customers.
Love it. Love it. And have you been surprised by the family members, like their ability to absorb training? Is it like, sorry, just maybe I can help. Is it like there's a third of families that will take everything you have and more, and then the opposite third, like they're not really interested, or like what's the trend when you consider the differences there?
Yeah, that's probably right. I'd say we have a third of resident family members who are totally engaged. They read the content, they are proactive in talking with us about it. Probably another third that's just kind of in the middle, and then another third where we have to be very proactive in talking to them. So when we do monthly care plans or quarterly care plans, anytime we're engaging with the family, we are introducing a dementia skill set. So and us, so I do the sales for Bella Groves at the moment. Anytime we are in the intake process for families considering Bella Groves, we are talking to them about this. We call it the social contract of dementia care. And there's actually a segment in our contract that refers to this. But what we mean by the social contract is that we are all agreeing to a shared methodology. And that's an important part of the discussion, that our success isn't a success just because we have the best activities. It's a success because we are all agreeing to a shared methodology. So families, us, medical providers, and then the fourth participants are just kind of general, the greater community, so local businesses. But families understand from the get-go, if they're signing up for Bella Groves, they're signing up to be part of the team. We're signing up to be part of their team.
That is just gold there, James. Like your ability as a senior living provider to be honest and candid with the families and say, listen, we're going to be part of that team. I suspect it's not for, well, actually, maybe that's a question for you in a second, but I'm sure that most of them love it. And actually, to that question there, have you ever had family members that are like, nope, that's not for me, that approach doesn't work? Like, have you had that?
Not yet, but I think we do a really good job in our marketing, our website, our content marketing. People understand what we're about prior to making that decision. And it is true, I have actually, I wouldn't say denied families, but there are 2 families that I'm thinking of that wanted to move forward with Bella Groves, but it just wasn't the right fit because I could tell we weren't from a method perspective, from an approach perspective, aligned. And so, those sales will probably more so fizzle than they were like concerted. Sorry, Charles, this isn't going to work. But for the most part, the families that we've moved forward at the moment, they get what this is about.
Just add a technical question, and then after that, I want to go clinical a little bit in the future. So when you think about it, most family members, when they come and visit, it's probably on the weekend when they have more time, right? Now, is that correct or not?
I wouldn't say that it's true for us, but part of that is because we're in a town called Bulverde, which is just north of San Antonio. We specifically chose a town that we did a lot of research, but we chose a small town on the outskirts of a big city because it's a tight-knit community. So, our average, I don't know about age, I don't know if I can say that, but the typical age range of, people in memory care facilities, their adult children for the most part are retired. So they're coming in throughout the week. I would say we do have an uptick certainly on weekends, but we have steady flow throughout the week from family visitors.
Okay. Well, maybe I can ask the question differently. In the event when most family visits would happen during the weekend, the weekend happens to be a moment where we're probably less staffed, especially with activities, which is kind of very restrained. What's the secret sauce there in the event that that happened to you, or if you had a piece of advice for the audience today?
So we do not have an activities director at Bella Groves. We do not have a person with that title. So what we have a director of dementia programs and education. What we have is our effort is upskilling the caregiver to do all of those things. So there are three major disciplines, I would say, at Bella Groves: care, program and activities. We call it dementia programming, and food and hospitality. We have managers in those three categories, and their job is kind of the role of like an assistant coach on a sports team. You've got the head coach who's kind of determining strategy and everything moving forward, but the assistant coaches are working with you on specific skill sets. The dementia programs director is working with caregivers constantly on dementia skill set, understanding what methods work best. They are also helping our caregivers to understand what activities are working and what isn't working. Caregivers are the ones who put together our activities lists, our supplies list. They're the ones who tell us what to go buy for them, right? And then same thing with care coordinator and kitchen manager. They are all training our caregivers to be effective in those tasks. So if managers aren't there on a Saturday, it's just, you just keep going. It's just the same thing we do Monday through Friday, which is caregivers facilitating those things.
Yeah, that's a great insight. So everyone, just as a note, it's not that there is no activities. There's actually plenty of activities because everybody is part of the general effort, which is, I mean, by default, a standard practice. Like interdisciplinary work has to be accomplished.
Right. And so, and this brings me back to a bigger earlier point about we got to break away from the pack and really push the boundaries here. I get the limitations of most of the companies out there right now. And so if you have a feeling of excitement or frustration, it may feel like the same thing of like, well, this sounds great, but how do I do it? How do I execute that here at my company? I don't know. I don't have the solution for that. I can tell you what we're trying. I can tell you what we're doing, and I can tell you it's working. And that's part of the whole Bella Groves mission. And that's why I come and speak at things like this, is I want to show the rest of our industry that we're actually doing this and we're getting amazing results. The resident outcomes for the people who live at Bella Groves, you would think of each of them as little miracle stories, and the caregivers are the ones who get the credit for that. We give them the skills and the supplies and the staffing ratio and the pay to support that, but it's not that we don't have an activities plan. We have an abundance of activities, just like Charles said, but instead of thinking about one person having to disseminate and be responsible for activities for everybody, that person acts more as a coach to all of the people who actually do activities, which is our care partners.
Yeah, so let's go one level in terms of like try to help the audience here, James. Okay. I'm sure that the bulk of them are at the very least intrigued, if not interested in, or probably even like, how do I do this? Like, how do I do it yesterday? So what would be, your advice to them as they approach either their team or their boss and say, listen, I have this new idea, this new model. Like, how do they engage that conversation with their organization?
That's a tough one. Charles, because I've tried to do that at other organizations, both at the community level and at the corporate level. So I've been corporate director of sales, operations, and training and development, and it was tough in all of those roles to get this to work. So I wish I had a solution for that. But this model, this thing that we're talking about with caregivers. I saw a question float by about there's so much on the shoulders of caregivers. How can we possibly add more to their plate? Mm-hmm. Think about I think we're thinking through the lens of what the current status quo is, which is poor staffing ratios, and the entire operations around senior care is that, if we have 1 to 10, there are caregivers applying to us that have 1 to 15 or more ratios at their other facilities in dementia care. I wish everybody could come visit. It is a calm environment most of the time. It is a very calm environment. And so caregivers, I'm not kidding, they have downtime. We specifically plan for downtime in their work activities, because especially in dementia care, you can't predict what that day is going to be. So in those moments, we're providing, and we do have a point person. We have the director of dementia programs. We have myself. We have organizations that we reach out to, like Charles is, and a few others. So we are utilizing evidence-based foundational tools, but we are treating the caregiver as the person executing all of our objectives, and all of the managers, our responsibility is to bring the resources and make the team operations work in a manner that they can actually do these things. So it probably will take a little bit of time to kind of unpack all of that, but I can tell you, from my heart that our caregivers feel more capable, they feel more engaged, and the people who stick through our training and have been here, almost at a year now, they have so much satisfaction in what they get to do. Just yesterday we had caregivers painting nails with 2 of our residents, and that's cool. Where else would you see caregivers stopping to do that? But we expect them to do that. That's part of their job description.
Yeah, that sounds great, James. I know it's a tough question, don't get me wrong, but I think you kind of started addressing it, which is that there is this winning formula out there. Invest in your team.
Yeah.
So then they, take care of your team, so they take care of the elders that serve their residents. I guess, going forward, James, you're definitely a visionary. Obviously, you founded a company that takes a lot. What's your vision, 2, 3, 4, whatever amount of year, where do you want things to go, and where do you believe they will go?
Yeah. This is a big bet. What we're doing at Bella Groves is a big bet, but I think there's a big payoff at the end of this. There was a question here about, would love to know average compensation for caregivers in this model. So our average pay in our market is about 12 to 13 from our latest research. Our average is right under 15 from the last wage analysis that we did, but that is also part one. They get 3 parts of their compensation. So somewhere around $15 an hour is the average wage. They get a appreciation bonus every 6 months of $500 just for being here. And then all of our employees participate in profit share. That means once a year when we when we calculate all of our profits, there's an actual profit pool that caregivers split in. It is one of our foundational strategic values and beliefs that you have shared rewards. So these caregivers who are going to be with us in the long term, not only are they going to earn their $15 an hour to pay bills, but I sincerely believe that they have a track. If we're not paying an average total compensation close to $18 to $20 an hour within 3 years, we will have failed in one of our major initiatives. I believe we can get them there. And we're not just going to make that because we have great memory care facility. There are 2 other business lines within Bella Groves that we are growing. So generally in dementia care, if you can expect a 20 to 22% profit margin off of just a standalone memory care, most companies don't want to do that. There's too much risk, and the break even of occupancy is way too high for most companies to deal with. So we're betting on the other parts of our business that are going to float our profitability. So if level 1, which is the learning center, and level 2, which is the navigation service for people at home, provide income to the company, revenue and income to the company, we can distribute that back to our caregivers. So the future state, to come back to Charles's question, the future state, I think that that we won't be able to build enough care facilities in the next 40 years to manage the sheer demand that's going to, knock on our doors. So if we can't build enough rooms and facilities, we have to change our model. And I think the model that we're moving forward with here is that we're going to help families to be better family caregivers. And in the moment, we treat our caregivers as proof of concept of that methodology, right? So we are investing in caregivers as if they are the product, right? They are the product who are receiving all of our dementia education. And if they're successful at it, then we can help families to be successful at it too. So I think the future of senior living specific to dementia care is that we have to become facilitators more than we become facilities. I've never said that before. That just came out. So I'm going to write that down. I'm going to trademark that.
Yes. Actually, let me write it down for you. I actually love that. Facilitators instead of facilities. Good stuff, James, as always. All right. I think we're almost at quote unquote wrapping up time. What excites you now, like the most about your work? Like what brings you the most joy?
Joy?
Yeah.
Oh man,
like you talk about. Sorry. Let me preface this question. You talk about other people's joy, right? You're passionate about other people's joy. That's on your son. But what brings you joy to you, James?
Oh man. God, this sounds cheap. I mean, look, I have all of the personal joy of, my family and my friends and my community, all that. But I mean, if it isn't clear in this conversation, there's no script I'm reading off of here. All of this is coming from, from my soul. This brings me joy, Charles. Like doing this, experimenting with Bella Groves, talking to people like this. I want people, it's okay if we feel a little frustrated, like that sounds great, but how do we do it here? At least, there are people attempting this, right? And being successful with it. So I want people to have hope. There's probably things from this that you can extract and apply in your own work. But I'm hoping, there's 674 participants here. If even 5% of those, people, that's 30 people here on this call, if you have the courage to make this happen in your company or break away from the pack and do it yourself, I don't have millions of dollars in the bank. I just have a very clear vision of what this is going to be. I found the right partners that also believe in that vision, and we're just going to go do it. And here's the thing, if in 2 or 3 years that we've been able to prove to people, look, Bella Groves is a wild success, I hope it creates copycats. I hope it does.
Yeah.
So that's, that possibility brings me a lot of joy.
That's amazing. James, I probably like you a little bit, but I've been looking at the chat and seeing, not everyone, but there are people that are like, this won't work. Companies are not going to change the staffing ratio and so on. And I think a little bit like you, I just want to invite everybody to say that the future looks more like what James is saying than today's present. So we all have a little bit, mid-size or a lot of agency, but we all have agency. Yeah. We all have the ability to change that, right, James?
We do. Yeah. And that's the whole point of why we work the way that we do at Bella Groves. My one ask, Charles is always kind to say, well, what can we do for you? I talk about a lot of this on LinkedIn. Most of you, if you're on LinkedIn, maybe you already follow me, but these are the conversations we should be having. So add me to your LinkedIn, follow me there. Let's have these conversations. But absolutely, we have to have the courage to act. And we're a small little facility, guys. We're halfway through filling up our 32-bed community, and we took a big risk with a billboard that's 1/3 of our marketing budget. But all we wrote there was love is greater than dementia, and the people are coming because they understand we're telling their story. So have a little bit of courage, act. Let's go do this.
Yeah, I love it. And, it's funny because not everyone, it was not scripted that James talked about his LinkedIn. I had pasted in the chat James' LinkedIn profile. And here's my invitation to everyone. I think it all comes down to, our own degree of comfort. Some of us, we only live in risk, some of us less, right? But sometimes what triggers change is inspiration.
Mhm.
And like you all, I've been inspired by James's vision. Obviously he has the experience. He is a leader. But he's also a doer, right? And that's important. And I invite you all to go on LinkedIn, and I'm sharing his LinkedIn profile. James has a unparalleled style of telling stories. Actually, I don't know if I've ever told you, James, but I love the way you write. I love your stories.
Thank you.
And just connect with James on LinkedIn and just listen to his stories. They're really inspirational. Actually, a question for you live, James.
Hmm.
What's your method to write so well?
Oh man, I've always appreciated writing. I remember the first class assignment. I think this was in second grade when the teacher asked, "What do you want to be when you grow up?" Everybody in my class was like football player and pop star, and I wrote writer because it was just so interesting to me. And I think part of that comes because I come from an immigrant family and English wasn't my first language, it was Korean. And so I developed a love for language because I wanted to study it so I could fit in. And then I realized at some point, I have an ability to communicate in a way that it kind of brings people's attention to it. And I think it's
Yeah,
less about
yeah.
me, and I understand that communication is about engaging other people. So quick LinkedIn advice is don't write to express your own thoughts and opinions. Reflect back the stories of the people that you're trying to connect with. And I think, that's what we're doing here.
That's great. Thanks a lot, James. Any last thoughts before I wrap up and we get into our announcements today?
I think we unpacked a lot. This was a quick hour, as usually these are. And I know we didn't get to all of the questions. So send me your question on LinkedIn. I'll try to answer directly to you all on that. But I think a healthy amount of frustration is good. I think I have a chip on my shoulder from the 14 years preceding Bella Groves working in this industry. We can't feel like martyrs in this industry. We can't just stop at frustration. We have to understand what's happening with that frustration and then go do something. So act small, in your own capacity. But I hope there are more, organizations like Bella Groves popping up. But I'm not saying this just because this is the audience I'm talking to, but I sincerely have believed that I've always been an activities director at heart, an activities professional at heart, and every job I've had ever since is just trying to create the reality that like settled in my heart as an activities director. So if you can't create this change as a activities lifestyles director for your own company, become the executive director, right? That's how you're going to actually make the changes. Study, whatever you got to do, go get into the positions where you can make this change happen. And that's been my strategy. And so that's how Bella Grows ultimately happened.
Amazing, James. Amazing. I think for change to happen, you need the chip on the shoulder, which many of us have, and you also need the inspiration. And today you've brought inspiration. So thank you so much, James.
Thanks, Charles.
On that inspiration, James was so kind. It was shared in the chat, but please, I really encourage you all to consider the tip sheet that James took the time to kind of create with us. It's a great way to just take a first step. And I think that one of the messages today is that it doesn't matter how far you're going to go, you're not going to get there until you take that first step, whatever that is. So thank you so much, James. We'll be in touch. I put James' email. Again, his invitation is to contact him. Feel free to connect with him on LinkedIn. And it's been a pretty amazing discussion and a very short hour. Everyone, just a few more announcements as we head off to the tip of the hour here is in 2 weeks, we have I love the title just because I think that all people are cool. But we have Gwyneth Johnson, who's the CEO of Second Wind Dreams. They are the creator of the virtual dementia tour, and she's going to do a session all about why old people are cool. So please join us. Also consider our largest event of the year, which is in June. We came up with the title as a Palooza because we want to celebrate everything, all dimensions of activities and life enrichment. And again, that's our Activity Strong Summit in June. And just a few more announcements before we end up this webinar. For our friends in Ohio, but not limited to Ohio, we are partnering with the Ohio Person-Centered Coalition for a webinar on April 27th. And this is going to be led by Penny Cook, Chief Culture Officer of the Center for Innovation. We, as we love activities and life enrichment, we want to invite you all to consider going in person, right? Isn't it cool to do virtual, but especially to be in person for a conference of the 41st annual conference of NAP, and that's in Reno, Nevada, coming up shortly. And then just specific and exclusive to our clients, if you're a client, check in your inbox. We're excited to bring again our second All-In 2023 Link Senior Customer Summit. So with that, James, thank you. I guess I'll give you a call for the 4th or the 5th, but I promise you'll get something.
I want my shirt. I want my linked senior shirt. I think you get it at 5. So, and thanks for this group. I always love coming and talk to this group because like the hour just flies by. There's so much engagement. But I'm behind you. Just know that I'm working on behalf of people who are doing this work. So let's keep it up.
Yeah. One last thing, James. Thank you for who you are.
I appreciate that, Charles.
Yeah, anytime. Enjoy the rest of the day, and I look forward to seeing you in person pretty soon.
All right. Sounds good for me.
Okay.